Okay, this screencast is going to focus on the revolution of the Twenties Woman, and it's going to be a short and sweet screencast, so be sure just to follow along on your outline. So, obviously the 1920s was a time of much change, and that is also going to be reflected in the role of women and the change of the role of women during the 1920s. So women just began to kind of assert their independence and kind of come a little bit into their own during this era. You know, it's an era of bold change, and women just weren't afraid to kind of take a chance and put themselves out there a little bit more. So they're kind of starting to reject some of the older, more traditional values, and some of them even go as far as wanting to kind of demand the same level of freedom that men were given during this time. So the flapper describes a woman who embraced just kind of the new fashions and urban attitudes of the day. And you have that definition on your PowerPoint, and it does say that it's an emancipated woman, reflecting the idea of a woman being more independent during this time. One big aspect of the flapper was this kind of more modern woman was the change in fashion sense. So, we go towards things like hats and looser fitting dresses, but dresses that are shorter, showing more of like the calf and even sometimes a little bit of the knee, and that was really, really scandalous for this time period. The beads, the really, really short haircuts, kind of the accessories with I think I might have already said the hats, stockings, high heels. So these are just some of the more typical fashion trends that we would see during the 20s within the flapper. And like I said, for the hair, just common to like cut it off. Women usually traditional women had their very, very long hair, but they always pinned it up. You never really see women in like the more traditional olden days like wearing their hair long and down. It was always pinned away. Now they're just kind of cutting it into short little bobs. The flapper attitude was definitely also a big shift. So not just the fashion that women were embracing, but the change of their attitude and just their energy. Women became more assertive. They were not afraid to partake in some of the behaviors men were partaking in public, such as drinking and smoking cigarettes. They wanted to go dancing, and they're engaging in all of these new types of dances that are becoming more popular, like the foxtrot, the camel walk, the tango, the Charleston, of course. The Charleston is probably the most common dance of the era. And all of these things would have really ruined a woman's reputation before this era, because it would have been them going just too far out of their bounds. And so it was kind of impressive that society's kind of, in some ways, not all of society, but embracing these changes now. Now, a double standard does emerge. Before we get to the double standard, I just want to say a few things, and this is kind of part of your notes, but just it's not really the definition of a double standard. I just want to say that the flapper, while it does symbolize the revolution and the change of women during this era, that not every woman was embracing this change. Just like we discussed the difference between rural and urban culture, many American women are still maintaining that more rural culture mentality, small town, conservative values, strict morals. So most, women were not necessarily considered flappers, but it's just that flappers are who get remembered because of what a dynamic change it was for those group of women who did change. I wanted to go through one other kind of change. The whole idea of like dating was a social change during this time. You may have heard of like women being courted or courtships. That was essentially when you really only you would meet with a man and he would pretty much decide very quickly if you were someone he would want to marry, and then the engagement and the marriage was arranged really by him and your father, and you really didn't have a whole lot of say in the matter, and there wasn't really this like dating period. But now women are saying, well, no, that's not fair. Like, we want to also be able to partake in dating so we can kind of get to know different men and see, what we like in a relationship. And casual dating just kind of becomes a little more common and acceptable. And on that note, it isn't where you would just date one person at a time. Women would date many men before they would decide who they wanted to get a little more serious with. And I think that mentality's even changed in society over the years. Okay, the double standard will emerge. Even though women are kind of changing and coming into their own, there are still just different expectations for the behavior of women and the behavior of men in society. And women are going to notice this and basically feel, negatively about it. But even though they're kind of asserting themselves a little bit more and gaining some more independence, they're kind of still expected by society to behave a little better than men did. So for a man to have a little bit too much fun, to, get involved with too many women, that was just considered more acceptable than if it was the woman having a little bit too much fun in public and getting too involved. So that is kind of this mentality of the double standard, and not necessarily in the same regard, but we can definitely see aspects of the double standard remaining today in our society. Okay, so hopefully all this made sense. We're going to pick up in class tomorrow with an activity. I hope you all have a good hour of code, and write down any questions you have, and I'll see you tomorrow.